So, for this project, I decided to research Andy Goldsworthy. I was really drawn to his beautiful works that he makes out in nature, and was even more drawn in when you start learning how he works. It's just really interesting. Andy Goldsworthy grew up in the rural areas around Leeds, and he currently lives up in Scotland. So he's been out in the country for a long time. And for a good portion of his youth, he worked on a farm. So that rural nature in him really influences his work a lot nowadays, I feel like. He works with lots and lots of materials, and all of them are natural materials. Even his adhesives, I guess you would call them, and pigments are natural. The icicle image up in that left-hand corner, he just broke icicles apart and used spit and water to freeze them back together in the early hours. In the cornucopia, he used thorns to weave together a basket. In the tree image, he actually just used mud to create those darker stripes along the green moss on the tree. And all of his materials are natural, and he just finds them out in nature and sees what he can do with them. He does have a couple of more thought out works that aren't just out in the open. This tree with the wall around it is in a sculpture park, and the top image there is actually a an installation he did in a New York gallery, and he going back to his farm roots, he used, I believe it was cow dung, to paint the windows and make this trail through it, which I thought was interesting. But most of his works are just like that bottom right image where he's just finding stuff in nature and seeing what he can do with it and just making really satisfying. So Andy's Goldsworthy's works, as I've been saying, they're just an exploration of nature and his place within that nature. And his works really are not meant to last long at all. These snow sculptures are eventually going to melt, and sometimes he does just sit and watch them melt. He'll sit throughout the day and watch them go from morning to afternoon to evening and just watches how they change throughout the day. And the leaves in the middle that are on the water, that will eventually unravel and float downstream. And the image on the right, Andy's just literally laid down on a stone while it was raining, and he just stayed there until a dry spot appeared under him. His works really are just him exploring nature and how he can alter it and make art out of it. One of his series, I guess you would call it, that has always been so fascinating to me are these holes that he makes. Some of the works are built around actual already existing holes, like that one created in the knot of that tree, and I believe the one with the fall leaves around it is like a badger hole or something. But sometimes he also just does works like the snow sculptures and the sticks on the pond that are just absences of material in the middle, and they make this hole, this void in them. And these works have always been really interesting to me. They represent everything and nothing all at once, I feel like, of this hole in the middle with all this stuff radiating out from the center. It's just really, the hole in the center is like a void, but then there's so much around it, and it just represents a lot all at once, I feel like, with such a simple thing. It's just really interesting to me. And they're really satisfying to look at, especially the rowan leaves in the pile there with those gradients and the stones. They're really nice to look at. So most of the time, Goldsworthy is just working by himself out in nature, wandering around and collecting things and making piles of them and seeing what he can do with them, weaving them together. But he does have a couple of works where he's worked with a team, and they're still around today. The Storm King wall is for sure down in that left-hand corner. Most of his works are very fragile and will eventually blow away, melt away, fall apart at some point, but these walls are a little more permanent structures. He does have crews that come around and document everything too, otherwise all this stuff would just disappear eventually and we would never know about it. And I actually wonder how much of his stuff he has made in the past that has gone undocumented from his time just wandering the wilderness, seeing what he can do up in his hometown. But yeah, most of his works are just him interacting with the world around him, interacting with nature, and some of his quote unquote art is him just literally leaning into the wind and letting it catch him. He's just a really interesting artist and has so much patience that I don't think I would have.